Conspirinormal, where the nexus of conspiracy theory and the paranormal meet. And now, we join the show already in progress with your hosts, Adam, Serfiel, and Rob.
Although I will tell you that the only umbrage that I take is that when you say in the beginning of the show, when you say no snark, I think that there's plenty of snark.
There is. Yeah, I know. There's some episodes where I deliberately haven't said no snark because I knew that no, this one's gonna be bad. So,
I think it's a healthy amount of snark. Though.
Yes. I enjoy the snark. I enjoy the snark.
It's loving snark.
It is indeed that. What's in the very beginning of the episode? When you play the voice that says, "I never took any money from you." Who is that?
That is Al Bender.
Okay.
And in 1967 UFO conference, he stores examples of how his mental powers were causing people to die or get hurt. And he was just telling this story, and somebody said that he owed them money, and he just said, "I never got any money from you." And we first heard this. It was we were in Halifax at one of the conventions that me and Greg Bishop and Paul Kimball and Tim Banal were all at, and "I never got any money from you" just became something we just kept saying. So it's been my text notification sound for about 3 years now, and I get some weird looks when it goes off.
Yeah, I've always wondered who. I've listened to it. I'm like, who is that? Like what is the story behind that one? You know? And it's so appropriate to introduce the podcast. You know, just somehow it's like, I never took any money from you.
Yeah, I know. I need to rework it and sort of juxtapose that with Jane Pauley from Dateline saying UFO might as well stand for unprecedented financial opportunity. So I need to work that one in there too.
All right, so show's already started. In case you... Okay. It's hard. Sometimes we do like to do organic intros like that, but. Guys, we've got Aaron Gulyas on the line. I hit Aaron about coming back up. He's the main host, the only host of the Saucer Life, and which is one of my and I think Serfiel's favorite podcasts. We really enjoy it. It's a really just informative look at kind of like the past in the quote unquote flying saucer era of ufology. And it's a pretty wide scope now. I mean, it's pretty much everything from the 40s at least down, I think, to like the 80s. I think the latest thing you've done, there's nothing in the 21st century as far as I know, right?
We've done a couple of the royal we. We've done a couple of little things. We did a little thing about Stan Friedman when he passed away, just a couple minutes. I think when the New York Times story first broke about the Navy people seeing things like 2 years ago when it was actually news.
Let's not get that started.
Thing about that. Yeah, I know.
Shots fired.
What a dumpster fire of shilling. But it's fun. It's all fun stuff, and the 21st century stuff. I don't know because that's the thing. If I start talking about To the Stars or AATIP or Big Lou Elizondo, I'm gonna get the crazies out. You don't usually have a bunch of rabid fans of something. When you talk about when you talk about the humanoid wave of 1973, or something like that. So sticking to more obscure historical topics allows me to avoid getting dragged down in all kinds of engagement with current events type stuff, because to be charitable, people are passionate about these topics.
Yeah.
So if I can avoid their passion, that's great.
Yeah, and plus this is stuff that is still going on. I mean, it's not been conclusively decided yet what's going to happen. We don't know. So, it's like
right.
it's not historical
we don't have
yet.
Any perspective on it.
Right.
Yeah. And there's enough people covering that stuff. I mean, we don't need.
I agree.
We do not need another TTSA take. That's the last thing the universe needs. Let's have somebody's hot takes about almost anything else. But I don't know. I'm people are like, what do you think of the Project Blue Book show on History Channel? It's like, I haven't watched it. I know how much stuff I have to watch that I actually want to watch, that I don't feel obligated to watch because you like UFOs, watch this. No, I don't want to. I don't know. But sometimes I'll hate watch stuff like that, but then I just get angry.
Hate watch.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we'll have maybe in about 50 years we'll have a soundbite of Luis Elizondo saying, "I never took money from you."
I don't think you could say that with any degree of honesty, but we'll probably have him saying something.
Yeah.
As long as he's wearing his bulletproof vest or whatever he's doing, because I love whenever I see him in his goofy vest.
Well, I mean, and not to get too I don't want to get bogged down in this, but like this show that's coming out, I sat around at my parents' house, my mom just loves Ancient Aliens for some odd reason, and it's like she's watching this, and my dad turns it on in the other room, and it's just like, is this show really going to be any better than something like Ancient Aliens? Is it really gonna? I mean, is it really gonna just like break new ground, or is it just gonna be just this kind of like it's gonna support what everybody already knows? Or just confirm biases,
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think the people who are buying into the narrative that what we're hearing about government interest in UFOs is somehow different than every other time we've heard that there was a government interest in UFOs. They will say this is going to be the one that breaks the dam and unleashes the floodwaters of disclosure, down upon us all. And other people who have gone out there in articles and reviews and on the internet and been pretty opposed to all the hype about this from the very beginning. They will say, this proves nothing. This is nothing. This is dumb. Why aren't we looking at metaphysical stuff instead of physical stuff? Because that's where they're hanging out. And as much as I sympathize with some of those views, you can't get angry about this, and you can't think that this is stealing eyeballs from stuff you think is more important. I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, with the phenomenally fractured television viewing audience that exists today, and you can talk about DVR numbers all you want, but if you're like me, you got a DVR full of stuff you're never going to watch. Not many people are going to watch this. I mean, in terms of massive, groundbreaking numbers of viewers, it's going to be people who are already excited about this stuff.
Right, and not many people are going to, and not people are going to watch it and A, take it seriously, and not many people are going to watch it and B, pay complete attention to it. It's just going to be background noise.
Right. I mean, the History Channel it's the background noise channel now. It's one of the great background noise channels. It's what your dad has on because he was watching some World War II thing and then left the room without changing the channel, and 4 hours later there's a UFO show on. It's that kind of that kind of channel.
Yeah, I was getting my oil
fine.
changed the other day, and inside the place while they were changing my oil, they had some History Channel going. Because Ancient Aliens.
Yeah, it's American Pickers or Ancient Aliens or Pawn Stars or something like that. Yeah, it's...
Yeah, it's... This is going to be the UFO equivalent of, the next great Pawn Stars show or something. Maybe. I don't know. I think American Pickers and Pawn Stars and whatever are probably a lot more popular.
They need to bring the alloys to the Pawn Stars.
Try
to get a quote,
That would be great. That would be great. Or on the American Pickers guys are in some barn in Iowa somewhere, and one of those 5,000 old license plates doesn't look quite right. Could it be an alien alloy? It's as Adam Go Rightly has hashtagged on Twitter many times. We need to free the alloys because we need to know the truth about the alloys.
And yeah, maybe they'll find one of Joe Simonton's pancakes. They'll find one of those too.
The question is, what tastes worse, the alloys or Joe Simonton's pancakes? Because they didn't sound very appetizing. Whether
I would like to see a show that maybe delved into some of these things in a more metaphysical way, but I don't think you're not gonna see that on mainstream TV right now, because what they want to do is they want to keep UFOs on one side and they want to keep ghosts on the other, and they don't want to combine the two. So far, the best thing that I saw on TV dealing with any of these subjects was something that John Tenney said on his Ghost show, where he said, well, basically, I think this phenomenon is all the same. And that was like the most radical statement, and I'm sure it just went over most people's heads.
Oh, absolutely. And I think there's a reason that something like Hellier that has done a lot to sort of break down these sort of barriers between these different categories. I think there's a reason you don't see it on a place like the History Channel.
Yeah, or even the small town monster
stuff. It doesn't fit into right. I mean, that stuff doesn't. A show about the Flatwoods Monster. What is it? Is it a cryptid show? Is it a ghost show? Is it an alien show? Yeah, it's all of it. It's great. So you see that great stuff on Amazon Prime, and you can find good stuff out there. There's people doing really good paranormal documentaries, but it's not going to be the really cool stuff is not something I think at this moment that especially sort of large network conglomerates and advertisers are probably comfortable with, because they're going to break it down. It's like, who's the audience? And I'm sure they have market research that they claim shows that the ghost audience and the UFO audience are distinct audiences. And so why would we want to mess this up? It's the only explanation for why everything sort of feels the same on these shows on cable. There's a sort of data informed reason why what's on TV is on TV, I think.
Yeah, it's just this kind of keep it simple, stupid kind of mentality that they have. And also, I think too, like with the Ancient Aliens, and like that thing is like, what, 13 seasons or just something ridiculous right now. And
it's insane.
Yeah, that Prometheus Entertainment, they have a narrative that they push.
Yes, they do. And it's interesting that they I mean, you look through the channel guide and you see Ancient Aliens, like, oh, what's on Ancient Aliens this week? And it's something that's not about anything ancient alien at all. I think there was a Roswell. They did a Roswell episode or something like that, and tied it back into Ancient Aliens somehow. But they've got their brand, and they've got the crazy hair guy, and they've got a good deal of real estate in that space.
Oh, they've got Van Daniken and Tsoukalos teaming up on the shows now. They're like going out and investigating stuff,
Oh,
like together. They're like
Lordy.
it's like a buddy film. It's like, oh, there's both of them, you know.
That, oh boy, that might be worth checking out. Just they don't have man.
I remember that Von Daniken had his own Ancient Aliens themed theme park in Switzerland or something like that. It's just absurd, man.
Oh, yeah.
Let's get your thoughts on the passing of Stanton Friedman, because we pretty much the day that it happened, I had Tim Banal already scheduled to come on, and Friedman died I think that day or the day before. So we got a pretty fresh take on it, but I'd like to get your take on it too, since you did kind of like a 4 little mini episode on him.
Yeah. I think everybody who's done anything that's involved the word Roswell and made money off it owes Stan Freeman for that money. He didn't write the first book about it, but he did most of the research that went into that first book that Bill Moore did some of the research. Stan Freeman did more of the research, and Charles Berlitz put his name on it, much like the Bermuda Triangle or Philadelphia Experiment books he worked on.
Yep.
Stan Freedman was might not have been a scientist working in an academic research environment, but he was a scientist who worked in industrial environments and in areas of physics, and he understood science in a way that I think to a degree informed what he was doing, but most of all he understood the idea of a research process. And I think he did solid research as far as the process goes, regardless of what one thinks about his conclusions. And I think that, to a certain degree, he became so married to the Roswell thing that it's hard for him to see any sort of counter arguments. But I think it's great that sort of in his later years, he was doing books like Science and UFOs and things like that, sort of branching out from Roswell and getting back to sort of originally the more broad stuff he did when he was lecturing on college tours back in the 60s. I met him once a year ago, just about 53 weeks ago in Halifax, his last presentation in Halifax, and just a great guy. It was he was out there. I don't think he heard any of the other presentations because he was out there manning his book table, even though everybody was in listening to presentations. But the guy was a pro, and he had his way of doing things. And you man the book table just in case you can sell another book to somebody. And but just a sweet guy, a nice guy. A pretty down-to-earth guy. Some of the people in the audience asked him his opinions about some of the recent revelations or recent as of a year ago, and he didn't blow them off, but he's just like, well, there's a lot of stuff that people say, and you just have to sort of wait and see what the evidence shows. He didn't jump on every bandwagon that came along, and I think with stuff like the Roswell slides a few years ago, he was smart enough to keep his name out of that.
That's very smart.
And some other people weren't, regardless of what they said afterwards about how smart they were to not get any more involved than they did. But other people would see a payday, and Stan would say, look, it's a payday, but what damage is it going to do down the road to your reputation? So I think he was a solid researcher. I think he was a good and clear and precise writer. One of the books that I don't have anymore that I wish I had was his top secret magic book about MJ12. I think the MJ12, much like Roswell, it was one of those things where he, I'm not sure after a certain number of years how objective he could be about it, but you could say that about anybody. He had integrity. I've never seen evidence to the contrary, anyway.
Yeah.
Which is just vanishingly rare in this field. He was, I think Tim would agree. He was always sort of welcoming and encouraging to people who were new in the field. You never got the sense that Stan was trying to be a gatekeeper or trying to jealously guard his corner of ufology. He was generous with his time and everything. He was a great guy, and a lot of the people who talk about the old time ufologists who aren't on board with all the new cool stuff. Sometimes they'd be talking about Stan, and I'm just like, dude, you're nothing without him. I mean, he invented the idea of the modern ufologist. When we think of this incredibly rare idea of a professional ufologist, it's pretty much Stan. As far as doing research and writing and speaking, and not having a radio show on the side as well as all of that, and actually continually doing work. Stan invented that. I think Stan and Jim Moseley sort of, but he had a second job as a sort of shady archaeologist, but Stan was just a pioneer in so many ways, and it really is. I don't think there's anybody from that generation that was around in the 60s, like active in the field in the 60s, really still going. Maybe Bruce Maccabee, maybe. Yeah. I think that might be close to it. The 70s and 80s crowd is still with us, but earlier than that, it's getting thin.
Yeah, it's definitely a passing of the old guard, for sure.
Yeah.
He also, what I found rather interesting is that when he passed away, he was coming back from an event, and he was coming back from a conference, and so he continued to do what he loved doing up till literally the day he died.
Yeah, that's I can't decide whether that's like, oh cool, he went out like a ufologist. I can't decide if that's really sort of cool, or if that's just sort of, he should have been at home,
Sure.
I don't know.
I can understand the mixed feelings on that. Yeah.
You can't deny that it was just what he did. Even at 84,
he always wanted to be he definitely was not one of these charlatans. He was really serious and had a lot of respect for it.
I think he loved being out there on the road and talking to people and sharing his wisdom. I think if he would have been more of the carny huckster kind of ufologist, I don't know if they have as much longevity.
That's true, though,
as somebody like Stan would have, because eventually, people, you see through them.
Yeah, you wise up
eventually. Yeah, and the audiences dwindle, and pretty soon you're playing to a crowd of 12 people in the Days Inn in Fort Wayne, Indiana, on a weeknight.
Not that there's anything wrong with Fort Wayne, Indiana.
I once saw Colonel Wendell Stevens in the conference room of a Days Inn in Fort Wayne, Indiana, on a weeknight. Hey, no, grew up there, great place, but when you're playing the Days Inn conference room to a dozen people, half of whom think you're crazy. That's but man, Wendell Stevens was an interesting cat. That was wild. 1996. I think that was. I don't know, but someone like Stan, always in demand, always had a gig to go to, and a place to work, and I think regardless of finances, I think he was out there for the love of doing that and sharing that knowledge with people.
Yeah, and I had heard that he had retired 2 years ago, but I guess he still was out there doing it. So
he had his. I think he was doing his last sort of appearance at, I don't know, every state in the union or something, because it was sort of a retirement tour, almost. I don't think he could stop. I just don't think.
Yeah.
I don't think he could stop.
That's something I think it's especially in that older generation. That, I mean, and I think just guys in general, like, we don't want to stop. We want to keep going. And, there's some people out there that just like my grandfather, I mean, essentially, like, he stopped working, 6 months later, he's dead. I mean, that's basically how it goes.
Yep.
With some men, and that's,
Positive
there is that
stress.
drive. Yeah.
Yeah, it's positive stress. That's exactly it. And I think it is a bit a generational thing. I think it's it depends on the personality too. But I think you get that used to being out on the road and being in front of people that when it's not there, you miss it. And I don't know, maybe he didn't want to completely miss it, so he'd take some gigs, here and there. I know he wasn't doing appearances anywhere near the rate he had been just a year or two ago, but I don't think he could ever get out of it completely.
So let's discuss some of the things that you've been talking about on the Saucer Life.
Okay, yeah.
And this is one that I've been wanting to talk about for a long time, and I felt like you gave a pretty succinct summary of it in that I think it was like a 50-minute long show that you did. And this is on Frank Strange's and Valiant Thor.
Yeah.
And I mean, the Valiant Thor stuff just really fascinates me. Because I mean, you talk about some charlatan shit. This is it. The Stranger in the Pentagon.
It's one of the few UFO books of the sort of contactee books that I have a conscious memory of encountering before I got into all this stuff. It's that Inner Light Productions version of it from Timothy Green Beckley's outfit, because he republished all the good stuff, man. Beckley still is. Yeah, he's another one from that generation that's still around. Tim Beckley.
Yeah, we had him on the show back in November. He is a delight to speak to.
There is nobody else that you could say more truthfully. That guy's a character. It's he's just he's incredible. But that sort of blue and orange with the fake, not endorsed by the CIA, not endorsed by the Air Force stamp on the cover. I actually remember it from before I got into all this stuff, because it was sort of ubiquitous. And the crazy thing about Valiant Thor is that there's photos, and that's the thing that is just crazy about it. There's these photos of a guy. Who is it? Well, it's Valiant Thor, and I can't even remember the name of his Jill. Yeah, Jill was the woman, and Don with two N's.
Yes, yes.
Jill and Don from outer space. But
were they Venusians or something? What did they?
Yes.
Okay.
From Venus.
Yeah.
And the pictures were taken. August Roberts took the pictures, and he was mixed up with Gray Barker, and he was a big part of the Al Bender Men in Black story. And the pictures that we've all seen were taken at a meeting at Howard Menger's house, contactee Howard Menger's house in New Jersey. And Roberts was another East Coast guy. And, somebody, and I can't remember who it was, one of your listeners probably knows, but somebody, I heard somewhere that the Val Thor guy, was actually somebody that Gray Barker talked into going up to New Jersey to Menger's party. That a lot of this was sort of ginned up by Barker to some degree. Now, like I said, I can't remember where I heard that. I don't think I'm imagining it. But whether it's true or not, it's a great story, and but the thing is, Barker did so much stuff like that, and so much sort of pulling ribs and pranks on the ufological world that you could come up with almost any scenario and say, well, Gray Barker was behind that, and I'd probably believe it. But who knows? So Val Thor was not only connected with Frank Stranges, but he's connected to Howard Menger as well, and Menger is a whole other story. But Val Thor and Frank Stranges is he's a sort of self-anointed well, not self-anointed, but anointed by his buddy preacher. Fake degrees, a list of fake degrees a mile long. Just fake awards. Just a huckster from the word go, but such a nice cuddly guy that you sort of overlook that, because he comes up with this goofy story of Val Thor and the clothes that would not burn, and for some reason he was able to meet this guy at the Pentagon, and because somebody at a church meeting worked at the Pentagon and said, oh yeah, come on over, because he was it's a mess, but the story remained somewhat consistent throughout his very, very long career, only really changing a little bit in the 80s and 90s and in the 21st century when Stranges began to talk a lot more about the spiritual stuff and basically started up his own weird little religion that sort of looks and sounds like Christianity until you get close and you realize, no, this doesn't conform to any Orthodox Christianity that I've ever encountered. And if you go on YouTube, you can find footage of the ceremonies he would conduct, and it's just fun, goofy stuff. And Val Thor, Valiant Thor, and Don and Jill, and these stories about. It's like if Orthon was cool, Orthon's there in his jumpsuit out in the desert. Val Thor is wearing a suit, hanging out with women in New Jersey.
Smoking cigarettes.
Smoking cigarettes. It's the Venusian Rat Pack. Val and Don, hanging out, and Jill's over there, and I'm sure Howard Menger and Connie were talking about their reincarnated lives on Saturn, during this whole time. And it just seems like a much more fun, lighthearted thing. And like most contactees, if we can call Strange as that, I guess we can. Like most contactees, he had an ideological agenda he was pushing, but it was just sort of vaguely weird and religious and spiritual with no real cohesion to it. There wasn't a real sort of heavy political message to what he was saying. It's hard to know what to think of it, because Stranges did very well for himself for a very long time with this gimmick, and people don't last that long, and it didn't matter how many times it was pointed out that he was a complete fraud in about 5 different ways. There were people who believed him. I mean, there's people who believe George Adamski out there too, but he's dead, so it's easier and you can make up stuff. But Stranges was still there, getting loads of money from people. He had an inner circle that you could join with secret special teachings, and it was like $1,500 to join this thing, and people did. Just give him money for his secret esoteric teachings and his own personal interpretation of the Dead Sea Scrolls or whatever. And over time, by the 80s and 90s and 21st century, Val Thor was not even part of it. He was just running this religion, and in the eulogies that were put up online by, I think one was by his wife, and the other, I think, his sister or sister-in-law. They didn't mention the flying saucer stuff at all. They didn't mention Val Thor at all. He was just a a good man with all of these accolades from the religious and law enforcement communities that, of course, weren't all made up at all, and a deeply wise spiritual teacher. And it's almost like he was able to successfully shed the UFO stuff, the flying saucer stuff, and transition into being just sort of a cuddly mustached guru by the end of his life. But people like us remember, it's Val. He's the Val Thor guy. He's always going to be the Val Thor guy.
Did he kind of do you think he kind of started like kind of a cult in a way, like a small cult?
I think if he had been a different type of person, it could have turned into a cult very easily. I think what sort of it's hard to, the way I sort of define cult. Well, not me, but one of the ways to define a cult is it a cult or is it religion? I don't know. How do they react when you try to leave? Mm-hmm. In a cult, you don't leave. And if you try to leave, you are shunned and cut off, and you've already, cut off your family and friends on the outside. So there's this idea they build in the system where if you leave the group, you have nowhere else to go.
Yeah, you're isolated.
Right. They completely isolate you socially and relationally and everything. And I don't believe I've seen any indication that Strange's was doing anything like that. And he would have these meetings usually at motel conference centers. So it's not like he had a compound anywhere where he could easily isolate people. I think of it more as a very, very, very small scale thing along the lines of the Aetherius Society that was started up by contactee George King in England and eventually out in California. They've got little assemblies or congregations all over the world, and it's you can go there and visit, and they don't try to feed you the low protein gruel to break your will or anything like that. They're really very, very friendly people, and I think Strange has probably had aspirations for whatever he called his thing. I can't remember it offhand, but for it to be something along those lines.
Was there a connection between him and Ray Boucher, the Frank Stranges, and the whole
Yes.
Collins Elite stuff? Is that?
I'm not sure the degree the Collins Elite was involved, but yeah, Ray and there's another Ray Brochures. He was connected with him too. And Ray Brochures was mixed up in some aspects of the Lee Harvey Oswald JFK thing. Later became a gay activist gay rights activist out in San Francisco. Adam Gorightly has some really good stuff on Ray Brochures, but Ray Beshi, I can't remember how to pronounce it, that Redfern talks about in Final Events. I don't know that they had any connection, but the sort of religious overtones and the Christianity aspect of it does make me wonder. Yeah. I honestly can't remember.
Yeah, I'll have to look that back up, and as I have Final Events at home, I'll have to see if that was there was some kind of association. As far as I remember,
it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Ray Boucher was just this random guy, I guess he was an Anglican minister, and the supposed Collins Elite came to him asking him all kinds of questions about UFOs and all this kind of stuff. And I was thinking maybe there could have been some kind of connection between him and Stranges. Has anyone ever done any research to see who Valiant Thor and Dawn and Jill actually were?
Not that I know of. If somebody out there knows, that would be awesome to find out. But I don't think anybody has identified the bodies, but that's not how I want to say it.
Yeah,
I don't think anybody has identified them other than they were part of a fairly, moderately large group at Menger's house that one day.
Okay. Yeah. That picture of the three of them, that's the picture taken at Menger's house?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Was this something like they actually testified at the Pentagon or something like that? Or is that just a claim that Strange has said, or?
That's a claim that Strange has said.
Okay.
I don't. There's some new documents I found just today that I haven't read through yet, where August Roberts sort of wrote up some stuff about Valiant Thor that was related to Menger, and I meant to read them before we recorded this, and I did not. But yeah, I think the Pentagon stuff. Strange is a story about Val Thor at the Pentagon. Actually, I believe predated the August Roberts picture of the people. So
Okay.
I think there was a weird sort of thing where there's these stories floating around, and Gray Barker was working with Menger, and Gray Barker was working with Stranges, and Gray Barker was working very closely with Augie Roberts, and I think there was some synchronization there of stories. I've got this weird sort of semi unreal idea that there is a sort of like there's the Marvel universe and the DC universe, that there's the Gray Barker universe of ufology, and that, you know, if you look hard enough and you fool yourself into it, you can sort of see how Gray Barker was in some ways maybe trying to, or could have been, or could have, if he would have wanted to, construct a narrative that accommodated all of the different people's stories that he published at Saucerian Press, and that sort of seems to continue to today. There's a new Saucerian Press that republishes a lot of stuff, and I've found that there are some discrepancies from the original stuff and what New Saucerian has published. But New Saucerian will publish books like Michael X, the contactee I did an episode about a while back. They'll publish a Michael X book, and there will be a foreword by Val Thor that didn't exist in like Val Thor's, you know, beaming these things from Venus. If you search Valiant Thor on Amazon, there are all these books that you know, as far as I can tell, had no real connection to what Valiant Thor actually did back in this. Valiant Thor's Venusian health magic, Valiant Thor's Venusian science secret. That's a Michael X. Barton book, or a Michael X book. It simply has the new version that's out on Amazon. Simply has Valiant Thor's, you know, put in front of it.
There's also there's a band called Valiant Thor, by the way. I'll point that out.
Fantastic. Valiant Thor's still out there. He's publishing books on Amazon now. But yeah,
of course.
I mean, why not? You know, why? Who are we to doubt Valiant Thor, right? It's ufology. I mean, and you know, I can go down my rabbit hole of you know, comparing the text of original versions and republished versions, but you know, unless you're trying to make a specific argument based on the text of the book and what the original author's intent was, I mean, it's just flying saucer books. Lighten up, right? In the end, it's all just saucer stuff. So, but you know, Valiant Thor, it's this. I don't want to call it a meme because everything's a meme now, and I'm too old to use the word meme. But there's this idea that I think Valiant Thor now exists sort of independently of anybody who had anything to do with his creation, and he's sort of this free-floating figure that can be adopted to introduce contact ebooks with a new foreword by Valiant Thor.
He's kind of like Hermes Trismegistus. He's just a whole group of people posing as an individual.
Yeah, it's right. Valiant or the Saint Germain, the Count Saint Germain,
Mm-hmm,
right? You know, Guy Ballard can meet him on the side of a mountain, and he's walking down Fifth Avenue as we speak. You know, it's just a new identity adopted by part of a secret brotherhood, and these people are in a secret brotherhood so lame that Valiant Thor is the identity they've chosen, rather than Hermes Trismegistus or something like that.
The Valiant Thor supposedly didn't he show up at some of the giant rock conferences?
Yeah, that was the story, and whether he did or not, you know, who knows? But you know, there's, you know, Stranges would say, and I think some other people said, you know, I met Valiant Thor there. Oh, really? Do you have a picture? No, but he was there. Did he speak? No, he was there on a secret mission just to observe. But yeah, there's a couple times where, you know, well, who'd you see at Giant Rock? Well, I heard Valiant Thor was there. You know, really? Yeah. Did you see him? No. So it's he just sort of it's all down to the fact that there was a picture of a guy that they said was Valiant Thor. If there's a picture of a guy, it must be real and tangible in a way that the drawing of Orthon's footprint isn't, or that just a picture of a flying saucer isn't. It's, you know, if that guy in the photo wasn't Valiant Thor, then who was it? Yeah, tell me that, smart guy. You know, it gives you something to hang on to a little bit.
Yeah, it's just these things that seep into the mythology. Another thing that I wanted to talk about, there's another one that's always interested me, is you just covered Alternative 3. And even though this kind of isn't it's not really like the UFO or like flying saucer thing, I guess in a sense that it is, because it's really the root of the whole secret space program mythology. It is right up there as one of the foundational sources of the modern secret space program thing. There'd been for a long time, you know, Nazi saucer stuff, you know, and that kind of gets us to some secret space program things. But Alternative 3, and in particular the book Alternative 3, and this is something that I want to make clear, because I'm not sure how well it came across in I think it happened okay in the podcast episode I did on it, but it's very, very confusing, because when you read about Alternative 3, whether it was Bill Cooper talking about it, or conspiracy researcher Mae Brussel talking about it, or Jim Keith writing about it or speaking about it, or just about anybody who talks about any details of Alternative 3, that stuff comes from the book. Before the book, there was the television production. And that was, you know, much more low key than the book was. Have you seen the TV show? Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, and it's great. I mean, it's fun and it's weird. But when in the mid 80s, late 80s, early 90s, when Alternative 3 started getting talked about, you couldn't really find the TV show very easily. So people relied on the book and sort of assumed the TV show was the same. The TV show, you know, as far as it goes, is there are experts disappearing from around Britain and around the world. An astronaut who went to the moon saw that somebody else had been to the moon first. We find out at the very end that the moon is a sort of staging platform or launching platform for manned exploration of Mars. And it sort of ends there, because it's about an hour long, and that's really all they have time for. The book, which has as one of the co-authors the original scriptwriter of the TV show. The book was actually written by a guy named Leslie Watkins, who didn't have anything to do with the TV show, but sort of, you know, got the rights to novelize this, but had to include the co-author's name. And this book, it's a novel. It's fiction. It's great. It is great, cheesy fun. And it's so weird because it was out of print for so long, and somebody published something called Archimedes Press published a version of it that they claimed was, copyright free and Creative Commons, and has had all the disinformation removed, they said. But then, just about a year ago, Watkins' son convinced Watkins, who's now like 80-something and living in New Zealand, I think, to, issue the book again. So it's a sort of create space, print on demand thing. And it's, comparing it to the free version that was put out a while ago, it's night and day. I mean, it's the one that was put out free was completely, it's not even the same book in many fundamental ways. The book is the one that talks about all the detailed plans of the bases in various places and how they're culling humanity, and there's some people who are chosen to go because of their expertise, and most of us will simply be scooped up as batch consignments of just people who are there to be castrated because to reduce sexual urges and prevent reproduction, and will be enslaved. And if we are no longer fit for work, we'll be broken down into our core components and used for our resources. It's really the sort of nightmare stuff. And that's the sort of thing that, and the memory altering and the mind control stuff, that's the sort of thing that people like Jim Keith, and stealing from Jim Keith, Bill Cooper, picked up on when they were looking at Alternative 3. It's not necessarily from the TV show, but from the book. And the TV show is pretty clearly it's an April Fool's joke. It just didn't go out on April Fool's because British TV was constantly disrupted by strikes in the 70s, and it got pushed back. But it's fun stuff. It's the root of, like you said, the secret space program stuff. And I think, if you talk about the batch consignments and a select few being saved and others not being saved, it goes back to a lot of the population reduction conspiracy theories that are out there. It sort of ties into those. It ties into this idea of not much difference between some of the stuff in Alternative 3 and the FEMA death camp type conspiracy theories. It really is, the root of the most visible root of a lot of that. Because honestly, the idea of an elite eliminating those they think are undesirable in order to create a place they believe to be, better, that's not exactly a new notion, right? It goes back a long way, like in the real world. So, but Alternative 3 put it into this space age conspiracy narrative because it's an investigation, and the book tells the story of trying to get this program made, and how the powers that be were attempting to stop them. The people in charge of the TV show just keep digging and digging and digging. It's sort of a parallax view, 3 Days of the Condor, or All the President's Men style thing. That's the genre it comes out of, is the sort of conspiracy journalist, going rogue and trying to figure out the truth. So it fits into that genre of writing, but it tapped into enough things that were in the news at the time, like the U.S.-Soviet joint space mission, that the space station linked up the Soyuz and Apollo link up. It tied into the recently revealed MK Ultra experimentation. It tied into all these things. It was in many ways the most 1980 book that could have been written. And once you get people who actually believe this stuff as presented, sort of divorced from the historical context, it looks very sort of, prophetic. But at the time, it was just, it was very much of its time. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a completely awesome. It was an incredibly cool 70s, early 80s conspiracy journalist novel. And it's fun. I urge everybody to get the Alternative 3 book. It's $18 on Amazon. The Kindle version is dirt cheap. It's just fun.
But these things they just take on a life of their own. And that they start out from this like kind of this fictional kind of War of the Worlds-esque broadcast and the book is then, I guess, the book that joins up with the film. The book version of the film comes out, and then it's not available, so it has this air of mystery to it, and then people start just kind of taking it seriously. And you're right, these things still pop up, because was it 2 years ago, there was this guy on Alex Jones talking about how there's like slave colonies on Mars.
Yep. It's all from that same source. And what's great, Leslie Watkins was at the time, probably still is, a brilliant guy who really leaned into a lot of the narratives. He would write stuff up and send letters to the editor when people complained about the book being, people thinking the book was real. He'd sort of say, well, it's fiction, but there's a lot of stuff that was real that went into that fiction. He talked about how he was working on a sequel where it would be like a nonfiction sequel to it. And the trunk of evidence mysteriously vanished when I moved to New Zealand and things like that. There's a story, and I don't know how true this is. There's a story that when Penguin Books originally published it, they accidentally listed it on their nonfiction book list instead of the fiction list.
Ooh, yeah.
And so some have said that fueled it. Gray Barker at one point claimed that the book had been banned in the United States and was not able to be legally sold. And he was right in that it was not able to be legally sold, but that's because the publisher who published it didn't have the rights to sell it in the United States. And it would be like a couple years before a U.S. publisher was able to publish it. Not because there had been some sort of executive order banning Alternative 3. But Gray Barker was able to, it's not allowed to be sold in the United States.
Yeah, this stuff,
they're not letting it in.
Some of these guys, I mean, they're very much just like they're the modern day equivalent of like the Carnival Barker.
Oh yeah.
Not no pun intended. But but that's how they are. It's like you give you just that little bit, but they won't tell you why. They just let you fill in that gap, and then the conspiracies just blossoms from there.
Absolutely, and it's so easy. It's so easy to do because there's, especially with it's a little harder with the UFO stuff because all we've really got our lights in the sky and people's stories. But you start telling a story about political conspiracy, you start pointing fingers at the CIA or multinational organizations that are kind of shadowy. You start talking about mind control and drug trafficking and human trafficking and things like that. And, what are you going to do? Say those things aren't real? They're very real. Now, the stories that we make up about them, and the way we sort of extrapolate from the basic facts, that can go anywhere, one direction or another, and usually in a very weird direction. But an example of that is several years ago, there was during one of the recurrences of the they're going to lock us up in the FEMA prison camps thing. There was some online discussion board thing that I saw that I shared with my wife. And like, why Walmarts don't have any windows? It's because the Walmarts are going to be used as death camps when the New World Order takes over.
Jade Helm.
And that's it. It was the Jade Helm. It was during Jade Helm. It was 2015 or so. And then a couple months ago,
prior to all that, I actually did see some kind of weird military exercise at a local Walmart. There was actually all these trucks filling up. Yeah, I mean, it's just it's a big parking lot, so for any kind of urban thing, it's a go-to place.
It's a good staging area just because of all the asphalt, right? For the vehicles they have to use. A couple months ago, my wife pointed out a news story to me that down at the southern border, asylum seekers and refugees were being temporarily housed in Walmarts, and I was just like,
"Yep,
here we go. This is going to fuel it, just like every human trafficking arrest has something to do with Pizzagate, right? Every every time there's human trafficking in the news, it fuels those who are like, this is the big sweep where they're going to, carry out the 10,000 sealed indictments on everybody I disagree with, and they're all going to get sent to Gitmo.
Calm before the storm.
There's enough horrible. That's right, man. Trust the plan. There's so much horrible stuff in the world that it isn't too difficult for most people to believe that this story they're hearing that is just incrementally more horrible than what they see on the news every night. They don't find it that implausible. So, conspiracy theories get some of the, there's a lot of talk about, people who believe in conspiracies, are just seeking some sort of control or agency or some way to understand the world in which they live. I think that's partially true, but I also think that the very real underhanded things that have been done, especially over the last 100 years or so, have conditioned us to not bat an eye when we hear a story about a horrible thing that's being done by people in power. And I think Alternative 3 very much feeds into that. Who amongst us would not believe that if they could, all the powerful people would leave us to cook here on a doomed planet Earth while they go to their paradise on Mars and have slaves do all the work? I mean, I don't know. I don't believe it's true, but I believe that if it were true, it would be true. That's not a real sentence. But I believe that if it were possible, I don't believe it's implausible that people might have those motivations. The scary thing is the conspiracy theories are not keeping up with reality. And now the conspiracy theories just read like the news. I miss stuff like Alternative 3.
That's Alternative 3 is all pre-transhumanism, so now a lot of the endgame conspiracy stuff is about the elites, ascending into their machines, and not even the off-world colony thing is the thing of the past, like you're saying.
Yeah, and like I mentioned on the
Elon Musk.
Well, there
right,
yeah.
But I don't even think they're going to need us anymore. That's kind of the view now, whereas in the past it's like, oh, of course they need us as slave labor.
Right, they don't need an army of space slaves.
Oh, dang. There goes my way to Mars.
We don't need space slaves. Now, I mean, I think the whole AI thing has sort of derailed the whole,
exactly.
Space slave thing. And now, it's I'm waiting for more prevalent AI-based conspiracy theories, such as, some of the people whose names you read in the news who are in positions of power, they don't even exist. They're just a complex AI. And when you see, there is no Supreme Court Justice Elena Kagan. There never has been. Her entire history is invented. Judges are just complex AIs that have been programmed to provide the results and the rulings that the elite want at specific times. I'm waiting for, it's not too different from they're secretly a lizard person.
I think we can get that started here right now.
I keep thinking that I need to start more conspiracy theories. Just take random people and blame them for various things. I don't know, just put it out there on Twitter. It's like, anybody else heard this story that I don't know, Tim Banal is behind the whole Serpo thing years ago.
That makes sense.
Notice when Serpo started and when Banal started his radio show.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, I'm just asking questions.
Yeah, we should take that clip of you saying that about the advanced AI. We're gonna just section that little part out and put it in 30-second part on Instagram and see what happens.
Cool.
You were saying something on that I wanted to ask you about. It's kind of diverging from the UFO field, but we were talking about you were on one of Banal's show, and you were talking about something about QAnon, and it reminded you of some kind of like anti-tax movement from the early from like
I'm
earlier in this.
Working on a new book about this. about positive conspiracy theories. Yeah, the idea of conspiracy theories with happy endings, or conspiracies you can manipulate and control, because that's a different sort of angle, and it's sort of, and I think I'm going to, well, I told my publisher I'm going to trace it back, sort of starting with the sovereign citizen movement.
Oh yeah.
And the idea that if you know the secrets, if you know the obscure reason why the real 13th Amendment doesn't appear in any of our history books, or you know what it means when there's a gold-fringed flag in the classroom, that you can manipulate the world around you, the legal world around you, and not have to pay any taxes, and just be completely free and independent. But then sort of traveling from that to sort of weird financial scams, and NESARA is something that took on a weird life of its own about 10, 15 years ago now. And it started off, it was just a sort of thought experiment by an economist for a new economic system. And then through a very complex combination of a weird financial scam from Illinois and some strange New Age people, NESARA became this whole narrative where there was a new law that was passed at the end of the Clinton administration that would completely get rid of the Federal Reserve, remake the money system, put everything back the way everybody knows it's supposed to be. All of your debts would be wiped out, and everything would be good again. Except in order to prevent this from taking place, because it would ruin the system for what we have now, or for the people who are in charge now, it was signed into law but suppressed, and the Supreme Court put a gag order on anybody even mentioning it, which is not how gag orders work. But there was some people deep within the government, embedded within the government, who are trying to get the truth out, trying to get the law implemented. They just need a little more time. They almost had it, and it was going to go into effect on, I think September 12th, 2001.
Oh.
So of course, we had to engineer the 9/11 attacks to distract people and to keep NESARA suppressed. And there was a woman who called herself Dove of Oneness out in Washington. She's dead now, but I don't know why. I felt the need to point out dead, but she's dead. But she would,
not under any mysterious circumstances, right?
She was running a real scam. No, I think she's just dead. Sort of, normal dead, not conspiracy theory dead. But she was. Nobody's ever died under normal circumstances, but she was running this whole thing, and people were giving her money, and it was going to be okay because, go ahead and take out another mortgage on your house, because as soon as the white hats are able to get NESARA implemented, your mortgage is going to go away. Yeah. So just borrow all that money. There was a documentary, and I don't think it's streaming for free anywhere. I think you can get it, you can purchase it, I don't know where, but it's called Waiting for NESARA, that sort of follows some of these NESARA believers. But QAnon has a lot of the same features. The idea that despite the overwhelming evil and corruption of the government, there are people in it working to make things better, and you just have to hold on and look at all these little signs that we see. Did you see how the Undersecretary of Transportation for bridge infrastructure east of the Mississippi was holding his pen during that signing ceremony? Did you notice that? Did you see how that pen was pointed? I think you'll notice, if you look at all of the lines I've drawn and the words I've put on this photograph, you will understand that we are only hours, maybe days, away from the 33,000 secret indictments being carried out and the enemies of the Republic being taken away. It's that sort of thing. It's always just around the corner. And anything that points toward this happening is completely true. Anything that points toward it being nonsense is just propaganda from from the deep state, from the international bankers, from the Trilateral Commission, from whoever. They're just trying to keep it from happening. And this is such a it's almost sadder than they're gonna lock us up in the FEMA camps and we're all gonna get decapitated by the portable guillotines that have been imported. It's sadder than that, because that at least is like, yeah, probably someday. But it's sort of the hopeful conspiracy theories are just kind of the Simpsons episode. I'm so old, but the Simpsons episode where they're at Camp Krusty, and you've got Bart sitting there. Krusty is coming. Krusty is coming. Krusty is coming. Krusty is coming. It's that sort of thing. It's the people who hang on to the stuff are the little kids who've been abandoned at summer camp or feel like that. Who feel like, the world is not how I want it to be. The world is not how it's supposed to be, because things were supposed to be better than this.
Yeah.
What if somebody's going to fix it?
Right.
And you can help make it happen by sharing this meme on Facebook and confusing everybody who's related to you. And, it just spreads. It's the white hats are coming. They're going to save us.
In your exploration of like the sovereign citizens and some of these scams, did you come into contact with any of the Moorish Science Temple stuff?
Yes.
That stuff is weird.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's it's one of these things where we've got this kind of stereotypical view of what these organizations are. And when you say sovereign citizen, I mean, the first thing that flashes in most people's minds, and in my mind, is some white guy, probably from out west, because of the sort of connection to the posse comitatus and the land use controversies of the 70s, and it's not stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason. Sometimes it's most of the time when you come across a sovereign citizen, it's some white guy. But the Moorish Science Temple of America is an example of how this idea of there is a secret history that there's a secret history that we need to reclaim, and the truth is here. It's not always so connected to one demographic group or another. So you got a group of African Americans, and sort of connected to that is the Washita Nation, which is connected to the Moorish Science Temple, but they claim to be Native Americans, right. And they're not a real tribe. It's not a real tribe. They've got their own fake college, City University of Los Angeles. I think Los Angeles. It's Los Angeles. They've got a fake college. They've got this territory. You can join, you take classes, and you participate in online chats. And they have an empress, which is always nice. And she died a few years ago. They claim that they're on the United Nations Register of Indigenous Peoples. It's not real. But if you join, you can get rid of all of your connection to the U.S. government, because you'll be a citizen of the Washita Nation,
right? And
everything will be fine. It's very similar to renouncing for the sort of stereotypically white sovereign citizens, renouncing your status as a 14th Amendment citizen of the United States, and becoming and reclaiming your heritage as a natural born citizen of the United States.
Natural man of the land.
Man of the land, yeah, and you have to put a comma between your first and last name, and God help you if you capitalize anything, because
it's a
that
corporation.
Means you are not. You're a legal
no longer a person.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh man,
gosh,
exhausting.
I've been kicking all this stuff to Adam because he doesn't know about it, but I was like kicking the whole. Your birth certificate is actually a manifest. You're delivered from the water like ship cargo, and you're when you go to court, you're actually you're actually going onto.
You're under maritime jurisdiction.
Yes.
Or
when you are assuming that corporate capital all caps name,
it's just wild.
And when you go to court, you're getting onto a boat. That's what happens when you pass the bar, and so then you're under maritime law, and that gold French flag is there to show you that you're under maritime law. But I've been exposed to a lot of the more Science Temple stuff, and I guess whereas there's been a lot of crossover too, because I think a lot of the more Science Temple people have actually helped sovereign citizens also become these Native American nationalities or declare themselves as. So I think there's actually been some work in between. I know a lot of especially down in Atlanta, a lot of the Moors are known for squatting. So they will squat in like a mansion and then start spewing off like all this, their legal claims and Constitution, man of the land, and all these technicalities, and try to stay in these mansions for free when the sheriff show up.
Yeah, and it ties up the courts, and cops aren't sure what to do about it.
Yeah, because they're just so inundated with all this information.
It sounds pretty legal.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're like freaking out usually, and they got the Moroccan flag out, and
it's like the cops are like, is this going to be some sort of actual international incident if I,
diplomatic status? Which, I mean, it's very interesting how Noble Drew Ali came up with this idea of, if we are suffering this oppression under the American system because of our racial status under the law, if we can just change our self-definition and our nationalism itself, then we can overcome this systematic oppression. So it's kind of like, I kind of really respect where it came from, and it was pretty ingenious, but it's not true. And on the other end, I recognize this stuff really quick because I grew up with a lot of Mormons, and I had a history of some Mormonism in my family. So I saw just the other end. I was like, wait, you guys are just trying to say you're the real Indians, just like the British Israelis. So it's
right, exactly.
Well, the real
and
Native Americans stand up. Well, the real Hebrews stand up. Yeah, and you get like 50 different groups saying they're the real one. Yeah,
and all of these identities come with historical and cultural cachet that you can take advantage of. So it's an interesting thing. Yeah.
Just real quick, from 1973, Year of the Humanoids.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite stories from that?
Yeah, my favorite, being an Indiana guy, I really like the Hartford City, Indiana. There were 3 different people who saw the same sort of creature, sort of a silvery creature with box-like feet and a kind of tube running from the midsection up to the mouth. And they sort of moved slowly across the road, and then one investigator saw them sort of like do a little hop, 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 and then sort of take off into the air like a helicopter. I don't know what the hell that was, but it's so funny. And there was one where you got luminous dots sort of moving along the ground. You've got lots of incidents of strange creatures just sort of hopping up and down with their arms in the air, making strange sounds. It doesn't sound like aliens, because why would that's weird. It sounds like people. Some of it sounds like people in costumes. My favorite is the description of a hairy robot. I'm not entirely sure how that works, but a hairy robot. There's some great stories about, a pair of creatures walking along and one of them picking things up and putting them in a sack that the other one is carrying. It's such a varied array of things. And what's great is that the book from Kufos that has all these things, they also talk about the abduction phenomenon, and they sort of don't know where to put it, because it's clearly not a contactee thing, but it's clearly not just seeing a weird creature next to a UFO. And so they sort of punt and say it's a humanoid encounter, but this is weird, and we have to use hypnosis to get this stuff out of people. So we're sort of seeing this transition into the abductee scenario, and of course that's the year in that whole constellation of happenings. You have the Pascagoula encounters as well, which I haven't read the new book by the one guy who didn't write the book the first time around.
Calvin Parker?
Hickson? Is it Hickson who wrote the new book? Calvin Parker.
Calvin Parker.
I get it confused. They're just two guys from Mississippi. I don't know. Who saw really, but again, the Pascagoula creatures, they're weird. They've got like sort of spikes instead of ears and no face and weird tube-like arms with the little claw things. One thing I wonder is why don't we see this? This isn't an original question. Why don't we see creatures like this anymore?
Right.
Why do we sort of go in these phases of we see these guys, then we see these folks, and we see this other kind of people, and then we see we're back to humanoids. Talk about the tall whites and the Nordics that people still talk about. We're sort of back to some of that. Are there different creatures visiting us? Are they the same entity that is taking on different aspects for reasons that we can't comprehend? Is it really a very small number of actual encounters and a lot of people who, I don't know, talk themselves into thinking they had an encounter, and so they model it on what they've read about or heard about? It's strange. It's strange, but the real sort of bizarre weirdness, I think, really reached a height there in the 70s. The 70s are an underrated year for UFOs and the paranormal, or an underrated decade. We all talk about Project Blue Book and Dr. Hynek in the 60s, and then the abduction and heavy conspiracy stuff of the 80s and 90s. But the 70s were sort of where you've got this transition to these this new abduction paradigm, but you still got the weirdness sort of hanging out. But you've also got Jacques Vallée and John Keel doing more of their thing and developing their ideas. It's really a fertile period for the field.
Plus, you got
we can call it that.
The Travis Walton abduction that happens in 75. I mean, Close Encounters comes out the same a couple of years after that.
Yep.
There's several things that happen, and there's the 1973. There's a huge wave of UFOs. I just wonder why this humanoid sighting. Why 1973 specifically?
Yeah, and with the humanoid encounters being sort of clustered at the end of the year, but the whole year is just a massive year for sightings of all kinds. And who knows what was going on? I'm sure there have been all kinds of statistical analyses of what was going on sort of astronomically and cosmically, what it's like the old theories about, are there more sightings when Mars is closest to the Earth and things like that. You had John Keel with his Wednesday hypothesis. But yeah, 1973 for some reason was one of those years where a whole lot of things happen. And, apart from things like the CUFO study, you don't see a lot of talk of it anymore. Individual cases like Pascagoula, get a lot of attention, but I think especially in the 90s and early 21st century, Pascagoula got attention because it was people were able to add it to their list of abduction scenarios. It was along with Betty and Barney Hill and those others. People weren't talking about Pascagoula for the absolute weirdness of the creatures or the or the fact that we had recorded statements taken by the police and things like that were out there. Once the 80s hit, 90s hit, everything was, how do we connect this to what we already know or think we know or what's popular? But the 70s, yeah, and Travis Walton the same way. I mean, it's an abduction, but it's an abduction at a time when there wasn't just when that wasn't a category.
Yeah.
It was just another one of these weird things, kind of like the Betty and Barney Hill deal. But
the abduction stuff really takes over in the 80s.
Oh yeah, when it becomes capital A abductions and the abduction phenomenon, which I'm not sure that's the right word, but that's the word that gets used. And you have people sort of looking at that as its own distinct phenomenon, apart from sightings and all the other things we used to track, and that becomes what everybody sort of plays around with, and you don't have as many weird humanoid encounters, and you don't have as many. Actually, you don't have as much overlap between different paranormal categories as you had in the 70s. I think the 70s was sort of the golden age of when people said, well, maybe Bigfoot and flying saucers are all part of the same thing. You could point to some of these weird humanoid cases and say, well, yeah, look at that. Big hairy creature jumps out and there's a UFO sitting right there. So you started to see those barriers breaking down a little bit. But with the abduction thing and with Roswell and with MJ-12 in the 80s, everything just sort of those barriers and boundaries between phenomenons sort of slammed down pretty tight.
I think that's a good place to leave it, Aaron. Thank you so much for doing this. Where can people hear the Saucer Life, see what you're doing, grab some books?
Yeah, if you go to saucerlife.com, SAUCERLIFE.com, you can listen to all the past episodes of the show, and there's links to my books on Amazon there. If you throw Saucer Life in iTunes or any other podcast library, it's there. You can listen to it's the old cliche, anywhere you find podcasts, you can find it.
Highly recommended.
On Twitter, yeah. Thanks. It's been fun to do.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Stay on the line for us. We're going to close this section out, and we'll be right back to close out the show on Conspirinormal. So we've got a sponsor called ZipRecruiter, and you can further hypnotize yourself into success. And if you want to help us and help the show, on behalf of our partner ZipRecruiter, here's why ZipRecruiter is the smartest way to hire. ZipRecruiter's powerful matching technology identifies people with the right skills, education, and experience, and actively invites them to apply to your job so you get qualified candidates fast. It's no wonder that ZipRecruiter is rated #1 by employers in the U.S. Thus, rating comes from hiring sites on Trustpilot with over 1,000 reviews. And right now, if you go to ZipRecruiter.com/Conspirinormal, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's ZipRecruiter.com/Conspirinormal. You can try ZipRecruiter for free.
Please show your support by going to patreon.com/Conspirinormal or making a one-time donation at Conspirinormal.com. And now, back to the show.
This out, yo, rolling.
That's right. So, very epic interview with Aaron. Quite enjoyed it. I'm glad you brought up the whole Moorish flag thing. I was about to tell you see if he knew about that.
Oh yeah, I'm sure he'd encountered that. It's funny that.
Yeah, that stuff's pretty crazy. I'd never heard of that before until you told me. I'm
surprised you were in the capital.
Where?
Atlanta, pretty
much.
Yeah.
But I'd never really heard about that before.
Yeah.
Has that been going on? So that's been going on for quite a while then.
Yeah, they're really active there. They have a lot of African American cults in Atlanta. That's probably the center most, besides Nation of Islam in Chicago.
Yeah.
But the Nuwabians were from Atlanta. You know, they had that whole Dr. Malachi York. They had that whole little compound out there. But then, of course, he got in trouble for sexual deviances. But they still maintain that he was just set up. Then you have the Moore Science Temple and all kinds of break-offs of that, and that whole scene down there.
And they squat in the buildings, and
then they use like these obscure parts of laws about I don't even know, man. It's not
I wonder if was it Move, the one that got firebombed from the air in Philadelphia? I wonder if they were part of that.
No, I think they were more Afrocentric and recognizing that they're actually Africans.
Okay. So they weren't part of it, not under the protection of Morocco.
Right.
Because you mentioned Noble Drew Ali, so that would have been a long time ago. So this has been going on at least since the 40s, 50s?
No, before that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, you can talk about 100 years then.
Pretty much.
This has been around.
Pretty much, but I think a lot of this kind of like scamming and stuff has been more recent.
Okay. Yeah, and it goes in with the sovereign citizen movement,
right?
And all that
because
stuff
it's all
too.
about using this supposedly hidden history and legalese to change your status under the law. To say you're not responsible for personal income tax, or to squat or obtain land or obtain money, or
Okay. Yeah. So it's been a marathon tonight for us. So we're just and we did a fairly lengthy interview with Aaron. So we're going to kind of cut it short here. But I want to thank everybody for listening, because we did the show that you guys probably heard before this, which was the Romper Room about the New Thought movement. And then we talked to Dr. Future, which that was a little bit of a long time. And then hour and a half interview with Aaron. So. And here we are. So.
Yeah, we're hungry.
So we're going to go eat some chicken wings. But just want to remind everybody about Patreon. And I'm sure you'll hear it at the end of the show as well. But we do have a Patreon, Conspirinormal, www.patreon.com/Conspirinormal. Go there. $1 gets you in. You get to hear all the Conspirinormal episodes that we have put up on Patreon. We may have some special things that are just like... were you thinking about doing like a sound collage or something for New Thought or something like that?
Yeah.
So you might hear some special, interesting, different things that you might not hear on other podcasts. So, all right, guys, thank you so much. Next week, I have it scheduled. We should have Randall Carlson on, and I'm really looking forward to this. He just got back with the Grimerica guys I guess they were in Colorado. Mm-hmm. So we'll talk to him about his trip out there, and talk a little bit about some other things that he's been studying. And that's
cosmic alchemy.
It's just a form of cosmic alchemy. So always look forward to speaking to Randall. So, all right, guys, we're going to close out the show. So join us next week, and we'll see you later on Conspirinormal.
Shout out Fools Gone Wild.
Saca la bolsita.
If you would like to help the show, please consider becoming a Patreon at www.patreon.com/Conspirinormal. Or leave a one-time donation at conspirinormal.com. And please check out our YouTube channel, Conspirinormal Podcast.